What if I told you one of the most important American rock bands of the 70s was built by accident, and that same accident is what destroyed them? Because the sound that made them famous wasn't planned, it was forced, and once it worked, they could never escape it. This is the rise and fall of the James Gang. It begins in Cleveland, Ohio, mid-1960s. Not San Francisco, not London, Cleveland, a city built on factories, steel, and long shifts. While other scenes leaned into style and experimentation, Cleveland produced something else entirely. Direct, loud, no extra layers. And that mindset shaped the band from the start. At the center was drummer Jim Fox. He wasn't chasing trends, he had a clear goal. Build a hard, stripped-down American rock band that could stand next to the British groups dominating the charts. Bands like Cream had power. Fox wanted that same intensity, without copying it. So he started assembling musicians from the local scene. Piece by piece, the James Gang began to take form. But nothing really clicked until early 1968. That's when Joe Walsh joined, and everything changed. Walsh wasn't just another guitarist. He was unpredictable. He had studied music at Kent State, so he understood theory and structure. But at the same time, he knew when to ignore it completely. He could play clean and precise, or completely tear through a song with raw instinct. That combination gave the band an edge. But the real turning point came almost immediately. The James Gang landed a major opportunity. They were booked to open for Cream at Detroit's Grand Ballroom. For a young band, this was everything. A chance to be seen, a chance to prove they belonged. Then right before the show, a member quit. No warning, no time to adjust, just gone. Now they had two choices: cancel the show and lose their biggest opportunity, or go on stage as a three-piece and figure it out live. They chose to play, and here's where it gets wild. That decision forced them into becoming a power trio. No rhythm guitarist, no keyboard player, just guitar, bass, and drums. At first, it was survival. They just needed to get through the set. But something unexpected happened. It worked. Because without anyone else filling the space, Walsh had to completely change how he played. His guitar had to do everything: rhythm, lead, texture, all at once. So he adapted fast. He pushed his sound harder, turned up the volume, used effects like the Echoplex to create echo, and a Leslie speaker to give movement to his tone. The result was massive. It sounded bigger than three people. Not polished, not clean, but powerful in a way that felt real. And the audience felt it immediately. Because this wasn't a band hiding behind production. This was raw sound, happening in real time. And without planning it, the James Gang had just created their identity. But what made that sound special was also what made it fragile. At first, that accident looked like an advantage. In 1969, the James Gang released their debut album, Your Album. The title alone told you everything. No concept, no grand message, just music. It peaked at number 83 on the Billboard 200. Not a breakout, but not a failure either. More importantly, it proved something. The power trio worked. Walsh's guitar filled the space. The band didn't sound empty. If anything, they sounded tighter, more focused. Every note had a purpose because it had to. And audiences started paying attention. But wait, this next part changes everything. In 1970, they released their second album, James Gang Rides Again. This is where things shifted. The album climbed to number 20 on the Billboard charts. That's not gradual growth, that's a jump. And at the center of it was a song that would outlast everything else they ever recorded, Funk number 49. The riff hits immediately. No build-up, no introduction. Just straight into it. Sharp, punchy, instantly recognizable. And here's the strange part. The song only reached number 59 on the Hot 100. On paper, that's average. But that number doesn't tell the real story. Because radio didn't treat it like a number 59 song. FM stations played it constantly. Listeners kept requesting it. It became one of those tracks that lived outside the charts. And the way it was recorded made it even stronger. No heavy overdubbing. No layers of studio polish. Joe Walsh later explained that most of it was recorded live. The only real addition was a short percussion section in the middle, played by the band themselves. That's it. What you hear is what they played. And that raw approach became their advantage. While other bands were refining their sound in the studio, the James Gang leaned into something more direct, less perfect, more real. And people connected with that, because it didn't feel manufactured. It felt immediate, like the band was right there in the room. And that authenticity started spreading beyond just fans. After opening for The Who, something unexpected happened. Pete Townsend publicly praised the band, not casually, not as a polite compliment. He genuinely respected what they were doing, and that mattered, because it told the industry this wasn't just another American band trying to catch up. This was a band doing something different. And here's the key detail. The album went gold, while the single barely cracked the charts. That tells you everything. They weren't building hits, they were building an audience. People weren't just listening to one song. They were buying full albums, showing up to shows, following the band. For a brief moment, everything lined up. The sound worked, the audience was growing, and the James Gang finally had momentum. But success like that doesn't stay simple for long. But momentum didn't slow down, it accelerated. In 1971, the James Gang released their third album, Thirds. By this point, they weren't proving themselves anymore. They were expected to deliver, and they did. The album climbed to number 27 on the Billboard charts. Another strong result, another step forward. And this time, they had their highest charting single, Walk Away. It didn't dominate the charts, but it climbed higher than anything they had released before. And more importantly, it confirmed something. They weren't a one-album moment. They had consistency. But what really separated them was what happened off the charts. Because live, the James Gang were becoming something else entirely. That same year, they released Live in Concert. And this is where their reputation locked in. Because on stage, they didn't just play their songs. They stretched them. A 3-minute track could turn into 7. A simple riff could evolve into something completely different. Joe Walsh would take a basic idea and push it further and further, building tension, holding it, then breaking it at exactly the right moment. It wasn't controlled, it wasn't clean, but it was electric. And audiences felt that unpredictability. Because every show was slightly different. Anything could happen, and that made people come back. But here's the detail that stands out. On Thirds, the liner notes credit Joe Walsh with guitar, vocals, and train wreck on Walk Away. It sounds like a joke. It wasn't. Walsh later explained how he created that sound. He literally threw his guitar and jumped on it. Not for attention, not for show, to get the exact noise he wanted. Think about that. At a time when most artists were trying to control every sound, he was willing to destroy the instrument to get something real. And that tells you everything about where he was mentally. Because success wasn't enough. Good reviews weren't enough. Even gold records weren't enough. He wanted more. More space, more sound, more freedom than the power trio could give him. And that's where the problem begins. Because the same structure that made the band powerful was starting to limit him. Every song depended on him. Every moment required him to fill the space. There was no backup, no room to pull back, only pressure to push forward. And at first, that pressure created great music. But over time, it started to build, quietly, in the background. And nobody really noticed, because from the outside, everything still looked like it was working. By the end of 1971, the James Gang had everything. Gold records, sold-out shows, a growing reputation. From the outside, it looked like they were just getting started. And then, Joe Walsh left. No public argument, no dramatic breakup, no scandal, which makes it even more surprising. Because bands don't usually fall apart at their peak. But what if I told you that was exactly the problem? The power trio had become a trap. Every part of the band's sound depended on Walsh. His guitar carried the rhythm, the lead, and everything in between. There was no space, no room to experiment, no way to step back without the sound collapsing. And after years of holding that weight, it started to wear on him. So he made a decision. not to escape failure, but to escape limitation. He left Cleveland and moved to Colorado, working with producer Bill Simsick on a new project called Barnstorm. At first, it still resembled what he had done before, but very quickly, it changed. Keyboards were added, the sound opened up, the pressure was gone. Instead of filling every gap, Walsh could now focus on feel, melody, and atmosphere. And that shift made a difference. His music became more layered, more relaxed, more controlled. Everything the James Gang couldn't be. And the results came fast. His solo work started gaining serious traction. Songs like Rocky Mountain Way became staples on FM radio. Not because they were overproduced, but because they balanced skill and instinct in a way that felt natural. And while Walsh was expanding, the James Gang were stuck with a problem that had no clear answer. How do you replace the sound of your band when that sound was one person? Jim Fox and Dale Peters tried to keep things moving. They had to. The band still had a name, still had momentum, still had expectations. But Walsh wasn't just a guitarist, he was the identity. Without him, the James Gang still existed, but something fundamental was missing. And here's where it starts to unravel. Because now, every decision they made would be compared to what came before. Every new song, every new direction, every new guitarist, all measured against the sound that made them successful. And that's a comparison you can't win. Because they weren't just trying to move forward anymore. They were trying to replace something that couldn't be replaced. And from this point on, that gap only gets bigger. The confusion started immediately. In 1972, the James Gang brought in a new guitarist, Dominic Troiano, along with vocalist Roy Kenner. On paper, it made sense. Troiano was skilled, experienced. He brought a slightly different style, leaning more into funk and groove. It wasn't wrong, but it wasn't the same. They released Straight Shooter later that year. The album charted at number 58. Not terrible, but compared to where they had been, it was a drop. Then came Passin Thru. It peaked even lower, at number 72. And now the pattern was clear. This wasn't momentum anymore. This was decline. And fans could feel it, because the issue wasn't talent. The band still sounded tight, the musicianship was strong, but the identity was gone. The sound that once felt sharp and direct now felt uncertain, like it was searching for something. And that search led to another change. In 1973, Troiano was replaced by Tommy Bolin. And this is where things really shift, because Bolin was more than talented. He was a virtuoso, but his style was completely different from Walsh. Instead of raw, blues-driven rock, Bolin leaned into jazz fusion, more complex, more experimental, less immediate. And that created a bigger gap, because the audience that built the James Gang wasn't looking for complexity. They were looking for impact. They wanted riffs that hit instantly, songs that felt direct, energy that didn't need explaining. But now, the band was moving further away from that. 2 more albums followed, Bang in 1973 and Miami in 1974. Neither made a real impact. Bang barely reached number 122. Miami climbed slightly to 97. But by then, it didn't matter, because the direction kept changing. Blues rock, funk, jazz influences. Each shift moved them further from what originally worked. And instead of evolving their identity, they were replacing it. That's the difference. And fans noticed, because no matter how talented the new lineup was, it didn't feel like the James Gang anymore. And critics started saying the same thing. Without Joe Walsh, the band had lost its center. Not its ability, its identity. And that's a harder problem to fix, because you can replace a musician. You can't replace what made people care in the first place. And by this point, that connection was fading. Not all at once, but slowly. And once that starts, it's almost impossible to reverse. By the mid-1970s, the end didn't come with a crash. It came quietly. No headlines. No final show where everything stopped at once. Just smaller crowds, slower sales, and less attention each time they released something new. The momentum that once pushed them forward had completely disappeared. In 1976, the James Gang released what would be their final album, Jesse Come Home. And almost no one noticed. It didn't chart, not even near the bottom. And that silence was louder than any failure, because at least failure gets attention. This was absence. After years of trying to rebuild, Jim Fox and Dale Peters finally reached a point where continuing didn't make sense anymore. They had tried different guitarists, different sounds, different directions, but nothing brought back what they had lost. So in 1977, they stopped. No statement, no dramatic ending, just the realization that the band they started no longer existed. And here's where it gets wild. At the exact same time the James Gang was fading out, Joe Walsh was reaching a completely different level. His solo career was growing fast. More radio play, more recognition, bigger venues. Songs like Rocky Mountain Way weren't just successful, they were everywhere. And then came the biggest shift of all. In 1976, Walsh joined the Eagles, the same year the James Gang released their final album. And from that point on, there was no comparison. The Eagles weren't just popular, they were dominant, one of the biggest bands in the world, selling millions of records, filling stadiums, defining the sound of American rock in the late 70s. And Walsh didn't just fit in, he elevated them. His guitar added weight to their sound, gave it edge, made it less polished and more dangerous. And suddenly, he was part of something even bigger than what he had built before. And every time that happened, it reminded people of what the James Gang used to be, because the contrast was clear. One path expanded, the other collapsed. But here's the part most people miss. The story doesn't actually end there, because over time, the decline stops mattering. The failed albums, the lineup changes, the confusion, it all fades. And what remains is the part that worked. Because when people talk about the James Gang now, they don't talk about how it ended. They talk about what it felt like at its peak. They talk about Funk Number 49, that opening riff that still hits instantly, still recognizable within seconds, still powerful without needing anything extra. Or Walk Away. Simple, direct, no wasted movement. The kind of song that says everything without trying too hard. And that's why it lasted. Because it wasn't built on trends. It wasn't built on production. It was built on sound. And sound doesn't age the same way. It either works or it doesn't. And theirs still does. But it gets even more interesting, because the idea behind the James Gang, a power trio creating a massive sound without extra layers, became a blueprint. You can hear it in countless bands that came after. Not copied directly, but influenced. Less players, more impact, more pressure on each note to matter. And Joe Walsh's guitar style became part of that language. His tone, his phrasing, his use of effects. Not flashy for the sake of it, but memorable, recognizable almost instantly. And that's rare. But maybe the most important part of this story is this. The same thing that made the James Gang special is what made them fragile. A band built around one structure, one sound, one person holding it together. It worked perfectly until it didn't. And once that balance broke, there was no way to rebuild it the same way. But that doesn't erase what they created, because for a few years, everything clicked. The timing, the sound, the people. And when that happens, even briefly, it lasts longer than most careers. Because you don't need decades to matter. You just need one moment where everything works exactly the way it should. And when it does, people remember. And somewhere, late at night, on a long, empty road, Funk Number 49 is still playing. Still loud, still raw, still exactly what it was meant to be.